We have been going through the life of Jesus on Sundays for quite some time now, haven't we? And if you remember, if you were with us a few months ago, we actually studied some teaching that Jesus gave on the subject of prayer. Jesus taught on prayer, and he largely did it in Matthew chapter 6 and Luke chapter 11, for those who remember that. And in one of those sermons, in one of those Sundays, we encouraged you to take 5. How many remember being encouraged to take 5? Were you here for that? A few of you? Okay. That's encouraging, I guess. We actually passed out Take 5 candy bars that day. And so, it's good when you come to church and get chocolate. That was a memorable day. No chocolate today, I'm sorry. But anyhow, we encourage you to take 5 minutes every day, if you don't have a normal prayer rhythm, to take 5 minutes a day and talk to God. And that's a good starting point. We give you tools. We won't get into all of that. But basically, to start a rhythm. Now, I don't want anyone raising their hands. I don't want you to participate in this part yet. But I wonder how many of us, if we were honest, we kind of dropped off along the way. Our prayer life kind of stopped. And I want to ask that question before we get into today's story. I want to ask the question, and I'll put it on the screen to get us thinking. Why do we give up and stop praying? There could be lots of reasons. When I say prayer, we often think of prayer as asking God for what we need. And the reason why is the number one reason we come to God usually in prayer, the number one reason we come to God is because we need something, right? That's usually what gets us to Him, is we're asking for something. It could be help, strength, guidance, something very specific. But usually what gets us to pray is we need something from God. Now, prayer is more than just asking. Prayer is, I think, a relationship, is communicating in a relationship with your Heavenly Father. Is more than that. I believe there's a whole content where prayer is ultimately one of the best forms of therapy that you'll ever have. It's a whole different conversation I've alluded to. But ultimately, we usually come and pray because we need something, and people stop coming and asking God. And why? And I want maybe to ask you to help me with some reasons. So some of you put your thinking caps on, maybe from your own life experience, or from people that observations you've made around you. What are some reasons why we give up and stop praying? Anybody got some? Yes, ma'am? Go ahead. Okay, Dave, 1 second. Kathy? I got this, right? Yeah. I don't. Thanks, God. When I need you, I'll let you know, right? That's true. Dave? We lose faith. Okay, yeah, we get, maybe because we didn't get an answer we wanted and we thought maybe it's not going to ever come, right? So we just give up. Everybody else? Yes, ma'am, Camden. Forget to pray? It's not part of our schedule, our habit, so it just, whoops. That's true. It's good. I like that. It's good input. Who else? Man, you're okay today. I got to be honest with you, the 9 o'clock group, now we had a lot of people here, 9 o'clock, they rocked at this, okay? They're usually the dead crowd. They haven't had their coffee yet. They were amazing. So I was hoping that 10:45 would come through, and we got a good start. Joe? The desire goes away, right? And probably because, that's a very good point, and probably because we wonder what the payoff is. Back to Dave's point, did it even work? Okay, that's good. I like that. Anybody else? Why do we give up and quit praying? Steve? We forget? Yep, it just slips away. Yes, ma'am. Patty? Get busy? Yeah, absolutely. And life catches up. Yes, ma'am. Laura, we don't think it'll work. Maybe because it didn't work one time before, right? Yeah, it's good. Maybe we think maybe we don't think that, we wouldn't say God doesn't care. Maybe we would say He cares, he's just busy. He's busy. And I'm not that important on the list. That's some good reasons. You guys are doing great. Look at you. This is an okay crowd. Anybody got one more for me? Camden? It's too small a problem for God. Let's not waste His time, right? That's what we think. That's good. I like that input. You guys are really doing good. Yes, ma'am, Pam. Okay, and since some prayers are not answered, then we wonder if this one would be answered, and so we just, why try? That's a really helpful. I love this. Yes, ma'am. Too many requests? Yeah, I don't want to bother God anymore. I like it. My goodness, I could just sit down and let you guys take over. This is great. Okay, well, these are some great reasons. I wrote some reasons down in case nobody participated, and I don't have to use any of them, so I appreciate the help. But we're going to continue our journey through the life of Jesus today with a story that Jesus tells about this. In fact, the story that we're going to read today is only recorded in the Gospel of Luke. Only Luke tells the story, and this is kind of cool, Luke tells us the reason Jesus tells the story before he tells the story Jesus told. Usually when Jesus tells a story, you got to read the whole thing and say, okay, why did he tell us that story? But Luke gives spoilers at the front. Let's read it together in Luke 18, verse 1. It says, one day, Jesus told his disciples a story to show that they should always pray and never give up. That's the reason he's telling the story to his audience, his disciples, is because he wants them to always pray. We put those words in bold on the screen. Always pray and never give up. That's a good statement, isn't it? That's good. Always pray and never give up. Can you all say that with me? Ready? Always pray and never give up. Man, that's good stuff. And that could be an encouragement to you or the person sitting next to you. So I want you to look at the person nearest to you right now and say those words to each other right now. Ready? Say, always pray and never give up. That was the reason Jesus told the story. What's the story? It's a short story, folks. It's a very short story. After he tells it, he gives us some application. We'll do the same thing ourselves. Let's look at verse number 2. Jesus said, there was a judge in a certain city who neither feared God nor cared about people. Now, judges have been around as long as there's been time. Judges live in cities and places where their job is to sort out problems. They could be people their job is to enforce the laws of the land and interpret them. Their job could be to settle disputes between people. Think Judge Judy or somebody, I don't know. They're just judges, and their job is to help people sort out their issues and give them justice, give them help, do what they need them to do. It's a powerful role. The problem was in this particular city, the judge there is not a good person. It says that he neither feared God nor cared about people, which implies that he was a corrupt judge. Maybe he took bribes from the people who had money, right? Or maybe he just helped those who were powerful enough to return the favor. I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. He's not a good judge. And it says particularly that he neither feared God nor cared about people, which means that's a pretty lethal combination. If I can just think this through with you, if this judge did either of those two things right, he might have been an okay judge, right? Think about this. If he did not care about people, but he feared God, well, fearing God means having an awe of God or a respect for God. If he didn't care about people, but he respected God and his presence and his expectations, then he might have been a good judge because he might have said, I'm going to do the right thing for people, not because I care about them, but because I care what God thinks and I work for him and he cares about people. So had he only feared God, he may have been okay. Or had he not feared God, could care less what God thinks if God's even there, but he did care about people, he may have also done a good job because he wanted to do what's right for people. Lots of folks like that in the world. If either of those things was in order, he may have been okay. The problem with this judge is he neither feared God nor cared about people. That's rough. He's the first character in our story. There's one more character in the next verse, verse 3. It says, a widow of that city came to him repeatedly, saying, give me justice in this dispute with my enemy. Now, a widow is in a difficult spot. A widow is somebody who in that cultural time, as we have often said here, women didn't have a lot of good standing in culture back then in general. And this is a woman who we could be said by many to be used and forgotten. They're amongst the poor and the fatherless, and the widows are all kind of lumped together in poverty. She has nothing to offer a judge who is corrupt. She has nothing to leverage a judge who doesn't fear God or care about people. She's going to be the people that is going to be dismissed. But she has a need. She needs justice. The word justice is a very big word. It just means she needs someone to help the right thing happen. She's in a dispute with an enemy. We don't know what the dispute was. It doesn't even matter what the dispute is. The point is she just needed someone more powerful than herself. This is important. Someone more powerful than herself to do what's right for her. But the problem was the judge did not care. He ignored her. We're going to see that in the next verse, but you also see it in this verse. Because look at that word repeatedly. You know what repeatedly means, Steve? It means she kept coming back over and over again, right? Just not once. Over and over she had to come back to this guy. That means that if he cared, the first time she asked, boom, he would have fixed it. Second time, he would have fixed it. But here's what she's doing. She's coming back again and again and again because he don't care. Now, how many of us today, but be honest, don't have to raise your hand, but be honest in your heart, how many of us would have given up? Like if people are blowing me off, ignoring me, at some point I'm like, oh, whatever. I don't want to try. You gave up? Yeah, that's honest. I mean, I think most of us would have, right? I mean, think about this, Laura. She has to show up every day. She has to get ready every day to show up. And I know it's not like modern times, but picture with me a more modern judge in a office building. And she comes in, the receptionist tells her he's busy. She chooses to wait. And the whole day goes by and the office is closed and no one sees her. This happens many times. She comes back and she catches the judge outside on the sidewalk and he ignores her. She is in the same room with him. He ignores her. By the way, notice something very important in the story. The judge does not rule against her either. He doesn't tell her no. He just ignores her. That's important, and here's why. Because we're going to talk about prayer in just a moment here. And sometimes we have to know the difference between a not yet or a no. The judge has not taken her case and said, I've looked it over, I'm going to rule against you. Had he done that, she'd stop coming because the answer was no. It'd be over. The reason she's coming back is because he hasn't given her any answer. He's just ignoring her, so she keeps coming back, even though most of us would stop trying. Now, I want to apply that to prayer early here, because in prayer sometimes, there are times when we ask God for something and he tells us no. And if God says no, then we say, okay, I guess that's your will. But sometimes God does not say no, he just seems silent. And when God seems silent, we might think his silence means no, and it might not. And the widow said, he hasn't said no yet. So she keeps coming back, and she keeps coming back, and she keeps coming back repeatedly. And I would have probably quit, but she did not. Because she wanted help, more powerful than herself. Look at verse 4. It says, the judge ignored her for a while, but finally, that's a good word, finally, he said to himself, I don't fear God or care about people, but this woman is driving me crazy. I love that. If you're sitting here right now, especially you men, if you're sitting here right now and you've ever said the words out loud or in your heart, this woman is driving me crazy, and she's sitting anywhere near you, do not look at her right now. Lock in on me. Don't flinch, okay? Don't get in trouble. But he's like, this woman is driving me crazy. I don't know what to do. I don't even care. But my goodness. And so here's what he says next in verse 5. He says, I'm going to see that she gets justice because she is wearing me out with her constant requests. Now that phrase, constant requests, in the Greek can be translated nagging. Okay? Girls, if your husband or your significant other ever accuses you of nagging him, say, no, I'm not nagging you. I'm giving you a constant request. I'm being biblical. I'm learning from Jesus, okay? That's what I'm doing here. And so that's how you play that game. But anyhow, he's like, look, I don't even care about her. I'm not a good man. But she's going to get what she needs because she's wearing me out. And I love that phrase, wearing me out. Because I'm going to tell you right now, that judge, he believed that he was going to wear her out. Right? That's why he kept ignoring her. I mean, think about this. All those times she kept coming to the judge for help, it was no problem for him. He was going to the office anyhow, whether or not she was there or not. He was just going to work. But she was going out of her way to get ready every day, to come all the way to where he was going anyhow, to be ignored. The physical grind and the time commitment and the emotional wear of doing that would warn most people out. And he thought he would wear her out, but eventually he's like, I can't believe it. She wore me out. I'm going to give her what she wants because this lady won't go away. And he grants her request. And that's the end of the story that Jesus told. Told you it was short. That's the whole story. But now Jesus is going to give application. Before we get to application, I want to make a quick point here. For those of you who are teachers or communicators on any level, Jesus is a master teacher. And whether you stand on a stage like this and teach a group of people, or teach a Sunday school class, or lead a small group, or you're a mom or dad and you have children that you're trying to teach, or teenagers or children, or you're trying to communicate with your spouse or a friend one-on-one, or a group of coworkers, or a neighbor, or someone you're trying to disciple. If you've ever tried to communicate with people, Jesus is masterful at communication. And I want you to learn something real quick. This is sort of a rabbit trail, but I want us to learn it. Jesus was masterful because he harnessed the power of story. How many of you could raise your hand if you want to this, how many of you have ever tried to talk to somebody, and as you try to talk to them, you realize that you are not on the same page? Like what you're saying in the vein of thinking you're on, they're in a totally different vein of thinking. Like you're not even connecting with the person. Ever been happened to you ever? Yeah, most of us, right? I mean, that's like, what in the world? Are we speaking the same language? And when it's one-on-one, you can kind of get that feedback, and it's frustrating. If you're teaching a group of people, you wonder who's locked in with me and who's in a different lane. And that can be frustrating. Here's what Jesus did, and we can learn from this. Jesus would say, I'm going to tell you a story. Because when you tell a story, everyone kind of gets into the story and on the same road. And now that you're traveling on the same road, he's like, okay, are we together now? Now let's take this exit ramp and let's go somewhere. And if you want to be a more effective communicator, that is a great way to do so. So Jesus has told a story about a widow and a judge, and then he's going to make application. In verse number 6, it says, Then the Lord said, learn a lesson from this unjust judge. Even he rendered a just decision in the end. I like that phrase, in the end. Do you know why it was the end? Because the matter was resolved. It was the end. She didn't have to come back anymore, did she? Problem solved. You know when the end came? Could have been earlier. If she had quit bothering him and quit coming to him repeatedly along the way, it would have been the end then. But the end that she sought was the answer she sought. And in the end, he rendered a just decision. And what's funny about that is the verse shows a contrast. It's an unjust judge who's rendering a just decision. How do you get an unjust judge to render a just decision? Persistence. Repeated attempts and efforts. And Jesus says, I want you to learn a lesson from that. And then he says this in verse number 7. He says, so don't you think that God will surely give justice to his chosen people who cry out to him day and night? We know all about those of us who know that God is our God, and we turn to him for help, for something that we need, like justice, something we need him to do that's bigger than we can do for ourselves. We need him to step in and provide or care or meet a need. He says, don't you think God will do the same thing? And you're like, well, yeah, but why do we have to cry out to him day and night? Like, why? It says, will he keep putting them off? You know what that means? That means he has been putting them off. Otherwise, he couldn't keep doing it. Why does God put people off? Why does he make them cry out day and night? It makes no sense to me. Why doesn't he come through? Is he like this unjust judge in our story today? And I want us to remind ourselves not to make analogies connect where they shouldn't. A lot of bad doctrine comes from people diving deeper into parables than the main point that Jesus is trying to make. But here's the thing. He's saying that the unjust judge, God's not an unjust judge. He's saying if even an unjust judge can be worn down, how much more would God help? But God makes us wait too. Cry out day and night, keep putting us off. Why would God do that? I don't know. Can I be honest? If you come to me and say, Pastor, can you tell me why God hasn't answered my situation yet? I might have to look at you and say, I don't know. I don't know. We know why the unjust judge didn't help the widow. It's because he didn't care. He didn't fear God. Why does God make us wait? I don't know. Can I take an intentional rabbit trail again? A detour to kind of make us think through that a little bit that might help someone's faith? What is the other analogy that Jesus often uses when he teaches about prayer? In this case, he's using the analogy of a judge and a widow. But when Jesus normally teaches about prayer, what relationship does he say God is to us? Father. That's good. So parent and child, if you please, right? He's our Father. So I want all you parents to think with me. Why do we sometimes not give our kids what they ask for? Now, I want to talk about that. Just think with me because this will help you, I think. When our kids ask, sometimes our kids have needs and wants. And as parents, some of our kids' needs, we meet their needs before they even ask, don't we? Before they even know they have a need, we just see it before they do, and we meet it. In fact, they may never even thank us for meeting their needs because they didn't see it. We just took care of it. Sometimes our kids want something, and they ask us, and what do we say? Sure, why not? Go for it, let's do it. Sometimes our kids ask us for things, and we're like, no. Can't say yes to that. And when we say no, we hope that they will what? That they will trust us, even though they don't understand. But sometimes our kids ask us for something, and we're like, I don't know if I'm going to say yes to that. I don't know yet. Because let's be honest, sometimes they can ask for a lot of things, and their mind can change, and their focus can change. And it's dangerous to always just say yes. It's like if you're raising a toddler. Here's a good example. If you're raising a couple 2-year-olds, a little toddler, your child learns to say when they want something, they say and reach out their hands like that, and you always like, ooh, here, and give it whatever they ask for. Oh my goodness, you're going to raise a little monster, right? That is not going to go well. You ever watch The Emperor's New Groove? The part where he looks like, I don't know what happened to me, and it shows him as a baby, and he goes, and they give him new things all the time. Oh, that's not a good way to do it, right? Anyhow, so what we learn is that sometimes our children want things, and we're like, I don't know about that one. I can't just say yes to everything, because sometimes they get over, like, squirrel, look over here, I want something else now. You get a Christmas present, and they play with the box more than the toy they wanted, right? Or whatever. And so sometimes when your kids ask for something, you're like, I don't know yet. Now, sometimes they don't give up. They really, and after a while, you're like, I think they're really into this. They're really into this thing. When our kids were little, I'm going to pick on Brett since he's not here. That's not fair. When Brett was little, he went through some phases. His first phase was Toy Story, which is a good plug because Toy Story 5 is out in theaters, I think, right now. Anyhow, but Toy Story, he was Buzz Lightyear was his guy. He wanted all, and once we realized that, we started getting him all the Buzz Lightyear stuff. Brett's first words, that's first words, but it's some of his early words. He didn't quote Scripture. He didn't quote Jesus. He quoted Buzz Lightyear, to infinity and beyond, And we loved that we got him all this stuff. And then one day, all of a sudden, he just didn't care about Buzz Lightyear anymore. It was Darth Vader for a little while. And I'd be like, no, I am your father, son, But anyhow, and that was his thing. And then after a while, Darth Vader disappeared. And you know who he was? He was Spider-Man. And I never forget how he loved Spider-Man so much. In fact, we got him all the little gifts, some pajama pants and outfits. And then one day, we decided, because he wanted the web shooters. And so we decided to get him for a Christmas present the web shooters, the Spider-Man web shooter. But that's not real, right? So we got him these little things you put in your wrist and you push the button and it shoots out silly string. How cool. And he was so upset, Oliver. He was so upset because it wasn't real web. You can't climb a wall and swing on that silly string. He was like so upset. We're like, I'm sorry, they don't invent that kind of stuff, And then eventually it was football. He loved his football. He would sleep for years. He still loves football. I love that, by the way. But anyhow, there were different phases. And sometimes when your children come to you and say, I want something, you might be like, I don't know. You might say yes, you might say no, you might say nothing for a while. But when they keep wanting something after a while, what do? You might say, okay, you really seem to care about this thing, Dylan. I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. Or maybe you'll do this, Mom and Dad. You'll say, I'll tell you what, you seem to really want that. If you'll do this for me, I'll get that for you. How many of you have done that before? Be honest. If you do this for me, I'll do that for you. Okay? That's fair. Now I want to take that back to God as our Heavenly Father. Why does God do what He does? Sometimes, let's apply those same principles. Sometimes God meets your needs before you even ask. God meets needs we have before we even know we have a need. Can you think about that for a minute? How many times do we never even thank God for something He does because we don't even know He did it? This is a good prayer to pray, Lord. I'm sure there's needs you've met that I didn't even know you met, so thank you. Sometimes we ask God for what we want, and God says, sure, why not here? Sometimes we ask God for what we want, and God says no. And that's when we have to choose to trust Him. Right? And say, okay, not my will, but yours be done. But sometimes He doesn't say anything. And if we want it bad enough, we keep coming back and coming back, and eventually He'll say, you seem to really want that, let's go for it. Or maybe He'll say, I'll make a deal with you. You do something I want, and I'll give it to you. Can I tell you what I just said right there is a powerful truth about prayer that I have learned in my personal life? I can spend a whole Sunday on that one topic. I can tell you how many times I've come to God over and over again for something I was looking for, and finally I felt God saying to me, here's something I want from you, Arlen, and when I surrendered what he wanted, an answer to prayer came. That's a sermon right there. But the point is not that. The point today is, why does God make us wait? I don't know why God. If you ask me why you're still waiting on an answer, I might have to say I don't know. Not because God's an unjust judge like the story tells, but maybe because of a reason that we can guess. But Jesus is trying to say this. If a widow who lives in a city where a corrupt judge who doesn't even care is able to be worn down over time through persistent, constant requests, how much more a God who loves you is worth you keep coming back to him over and over until he stops putting us off. In verse number 8, he says this. Jesus says in verse 8, I tell you, he will grant justice to them quickly. Now you're like, hold on, Arlen. You got a funny definition of quickly. I've been asking for a long time. It doesn't feel very quick to me. But that's not what quickly means. Quickly means that when the answer finally does come, it's clear. It's the story of the widow and the judge. In the widow and the judge story, did he answer her quickly, yes or no? Yes and no. Not quickly in the sense that he didn't do it the first time she asked, but when the day she showed up to his office, probably discouraged, probably wasting my time, and that's the day that he looks at her and says, fine, let's give you what you want. Boom. All of a sudden, her answer came quickly. When he finally ruled in her favor, it was decisive, it was quick, and everyone's like, wow, you had that judge right where you wanted him. That was easy. And she's like, what are you talking about? I've been doing this for years. Right? And that's how prayer works. You come to God and say, God, I keep coming back to you. I don't see you working. But when God finally works, it feels like, boom, quickly. I'm going to come back to that concept in just a moment here, so hang on. But before I come back to it, I want to finish this verse because Jesus ends his talk with this next statement, and it's so good. He says, but when the Son of Man returns, how many will he find on the earth who have faith? The Son of Man was the name for Jesus. He was talking about himself. He says, when I return, by the way, Jesus is returning. He's coming back. It's important to remind ourselves of that. Jesus says, when I return, how many will I find on the earth who have faith? Now, what is faith? Faith means hope, trying one time. No, the faith in the story today is a widow who would not quit when the going got tough. That's what faith is. Faith isn't throwing a casual prayer out. Faith is persistent, repeated efforts. Because anyone can try it one time like it's a hope. If there was a wishing well in Cedar Lake, there's no wishing well in Cedar Lake. There's no magic in the water of Cedar Lake, unless it's black magic, I don't know. But anyhow, if you went to a wishing well and you said, you throw a quarter in that well, make a wish, your wish will come true. And everyone threw quarters in that. And I went over there and pulled a nice shiny quarter out of my pocket, and I tossed it in the wishing well and said, here's my wish, and I walked away smiling. Would you say, Arlen, that's great faith you have there? No, I was just taking a shot. Why not? It's worth the effort. You never know. But if I came back to that wishing well every hour of the day with another quarter, every hour of the day, every day of the week, every week of the year for several years, you'd be like, Arlen, you are funding that wishing well's wishing list. You have a lot of faith in this wishing well. I think it's misplaced faith. Because that's persistence. And in prayer, if we come to God and say, God, by the way, would you do this for me? Thanks. And we move on, that's not really faith. That's just throwing out the idea into the universe. That's called abracadabra. Maybe the magic words will make my problems get better. Faith in God in prayer is when we keep coming back to him, and keep coming back to him, keep coming back to him, even when there's no answer. And Jesus says, when I return, will I find that kind of faith in the earth? Will I find enduring faith, faith that doesn't get discouraged and quit? Now, we have faith in other things. Lots of us have faith in things around us. We even like that story today because we know that even a corrupt judge can get worn down through persistence. Some of our favorite stories and our favorite books, our favorite movies include somebody who persisted. One of my favorite movies of all time, I won't say it out loud, but ask me later, includes a small little subplot where a man continuously asks a person in power for something they need, and their persistence wins the day. Because we love that story. We believe that for ourselves, but do we believe that with God? Or do we not have enough faith in God's goodness to keep knocking on his door until the answer comes? And Jesus says, when I come back, will I find that kind of faith anywhere? That's a tough question. That's a convicting question. Because when God finally answers, it might take a while to get there, but when it happens, it's quickly. There's another term I want to give you on the screen here. It's a phrase called slowly, then suddenly. This is a concept of life. This is a principle of life that is bigger than prayer, but Jesus is teaching this concept about prayer. How many of you have heard that term before? Slowly, then suddenly. Raise your hand. You're familiar with that? That's a life principle. It's a principle that Jesus is teaching today about prayer, but it applies to more than just prayer. This principle, slowly, then suddenly, this applies to getting in physical fitness, trying to lose some weight, trying to, diet, or try to build some muscle, or try to get cardiovascular health. Sometimes the progress is slowly, and then the results start showing up later suddenly. This is a principle for investing financially and doing right things. Sometimes it's slowly, then suddenly. This is a principle for relationships oftentimes. This is a principle for learning a new skill or a new craft. Feels like there's no progress for a while until it starts showing up. Slowly, then suddenly is a big idea in many parts of life that Jesus is teaching today about prayer. And I want you to get this in your soul. So, slowly, then suddenly, I want you to remember those words, and I'm going to help you remember them by showing you an image on the screen in just a moment here. Actually, I'm going to show you the image in 3 pieces. I'm going to show you the first one, then we're going to add something to the screen and add something the third time. And the final image is the complete picture. But this image we're going to show you is an image that represents the phrase slowly, then suddenly. Are you ready for it? It looks like this. On the screen, for those listening later, there's a line that starts at the bottom right of the screen that verges out to the right. The line goes horizontally, representing time. It goes up from there north to represent results. It's a typical graph chart. You've seen this before 100 times. Time to the right, results upward. And that green line on the screen is what we think should happen when we put in effort in any part of our lives. We believe that when we put in effort, that as we try, the results should start showing up incrementally, consistently. Put in a little time, we get a little results. We put in more time, we get more results. This is how it's supposed to work. And by the way, if it worked this way, we'd all be more consistent at doing things, wouldn't we? Because I'm doing things, I'm seeing results. I'm doing more things, I'm seeing more results. If it worked this way, we'd all be better. The problem is that's what we think should happen. The next screen shows us what actually happens. Let's look at that. This orange line is how it usually tends to go. This is the principle we're teaching today. What actually happens is as time goes on and we put the time and the effort in, the results don't keep up with our expectations. We're putting in the time, but the results aren't equal. They're lagging. And we're like, why is this not working? You can apply this to try this with getting physical fitness. You're like, man, I've been working out for 3 weeks now. And I don't have a beach body yet. Now, I was bad for 20 years, but, 3 weeks I've been trying, I should have the results, And so we're discouraged. It should be faster than this. But it does come. Over time, down the road, the results start stacking. People start noticing. Eventually, they're like, what are you doing? What's your quick secret? Your quick secret. I've been doing this forever. It's been frustrating. This orange line is what happens when we try to, handle our money better. We've been handling it poorly, so we start paying attention. We start deciding, I'm going to invest in my future, so I got to make sure my income is greater than my outgo, because if your income's not greater than your outgo, you're drowning. So I got to raise my income, I got to decrease my outgo, I got to budget my money so I know where I'm losing money at. I'm going to take the middle money, the money between those two gaps, I'm going to invest it in the future in smart investments, and after a while, 6 months go by and you're not filthy rich yet. You're like, what in the world? It seems like the results lag, and they do lag until eventually they pick up steam. Until the curve, this is called the compounding curve in finance. It's the curve of exponential growth. It's why Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, one of the two, used to say, the hardest money that investors ever make is their first 100,000. It's the hardest money they ever make. Why? because it's slowly then suddenly. Once you start getting some momentum, it starts really being obvious. But for a while, it's like, we're getting nowhere. This could be applied to relationships. This could be applied to learning a new crafter crafter skill. How many of you want to tell, you've ever tried to learn a new craft in life or skill, a technical skill, a new language or new whatever, and you tried to learn this new thing, and for the longest time you thought, I'm getting nowhere, I'm failing, I'm crawling through mud, I can't do it. You ever felt that way before? Trying to learn something new? A few of you? Okay. What happens is you feel like it's going slowly and your results are lagging until all of a sudden down the road when you are discouraged, all of a sudden after you keep after it, it starts to click. And once it starts to click, the exponential growth curve shoots up. This is why they always say that people overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year and they drastically underestimate what they can accomplish in 10 years or 5 years. Because in 1 year, we're like, man, I should be further down the road by now. It's the orange line. It's under my expectations. But in 10 years or 5 years or several years down the road, we're like, wow, I've actually done more than I thought I could do because this is the curve of exponential growth. It's slowly, then suddenly, and this is a principle of life. And I want you to remember, so I want to show you one more image here. We're going to fill in the gap between those green line and the orange line with what we call that blue section, the valley of disappointment. Or some people call this the trough of disappointment. Now I'm showing this to you for a reason. What happens to so many people in the valley of disappointment? What's that? We give up. That's what Jesus said earlier. We give up. We give up in the valley of disappointment because we're not seeing the results for the time and effort we're putting in. We stop trying to handle our money wisely. We stop trying to get physically fit. We stop trying to work in that relationship. We stop trying to learn that new skill. We stop praying because the results aren't there of what we think should happen versus what's actually happening. But the problem is, if we keep at it, when the results come, they usually supersede our expectations if we don't give up in the valley of disappointment. This is a principle some of you need to remember. Take a picture of the screen if it would help you. Write down the words slowly, then suddenly. Some of you ought to put those words on your phone as a screensaver so you'll see them all the time. Slowly, then suddenly. You see, well, Arlen, you kind of applied that broadly just now. Jesus was speaking about prayer. You kind of went broad. I know. Because it's a broad principle that Jesus is borrowing from to teach about prayer. And it's a Bible principle. You know who taught this principle? We're going to see one more verse. You know who taught this principle real well later on? The Apostle Paul. And he broadened this principle beyond just prayer to what we're talking about right now. By the way, if anybody in the Bible knew about slowly then suddenly, it was the Apostle Paul. Can we just be real? The Apostle Paul came to faith in Christ for years, like 13 years. He does nothing but sit back and learn. We overlook that part. When he finally starts his ministry, the crazy part is this. When Paul finally starts his ministry, what happens is he goes to a town, people gather, everyone's excited, and then the Gentiles, the non-Jews, start listening to him. The Jewish crowd in those towns gets jealous. They mistreat him and they kick him out of town. He goes to the next city. They follow him there and they undermine him until they throw him out of town. He gets tossed in prison. He gets beaten. He gets stoned. He never goes back to somebody. He writes letters to places he can never go back to sometimes because of his schedule. And at times he has to wonder where's the results. He has people who dedicate their lives to killing him before they even eat again. At some point he goes back to his own home city. Instead of being welcomed there, he's almost beaten to death in the streets. Eventually he appeals to Rome for safety, where Emperor Nero will have him killed. And he could say, my results are abysmal in this valley of disappointment. But what an impact those letters and his work has done. His stories recorded in Acts and his letters are kept in the New Testament. And 2,000 years later, the impact the Apostle Paul has made on our Christian experience is second only to Jesus himself. But I'm sure along the way it felt like it was abysmal. And Paul understood slowly, then suddenly. And so he wrote a letter to the churches of Galatia called the Letter to the Galatians. And in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 9, I'm going to read you a verse that I want some of you to decide today you're going to memorize. This is a verse to memorize. Ready? Galatians 6:9, Paul says this. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. Isn't that what happens to us? We get tired of doing what's good. It ain't working out. We're in the valley of disappointment. The results aren't showing up. Let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time. You say, Arlen, I disagree. The right time would be immediately when I first ask. But that's not how it works. At just the right time is the time when God finally says, okay. It's the time when the results show up. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing. That phrase, harvest of blessing, is a farming analogy. Because Paul, if you read Galatians chapter 6, Paul uses several farming analogies in this chapter. Here's why. Because farmers know slowly then suddenly, don't they? They go out and they till the ground, they plant the crop, they water it, and does anything happen the next day or the next week? They come out a few weeks, they're like, oh, what am I even doing? Nothing's growing. I'm done. I quit. Or do they know that eventually it'll grow and it will grow into a harvest? And a harvest is so bountiful, it is, what's the word? It is exponential. But it's slowly then suddenly. And Paul says, so let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. And Paul is saying, don't give up in the valley of disappointment. The widow in today's story that Jesus told did not give up when the judge ignored her. She did not get worn out. She wore him out. And Jesus says, I want you to learn a lesson from that. Because that's an unjust judge, and I'm a good God. And if there's a reason I've not said yes yet, it's that you have to trust me. There's a reason for it. Maybe it's yes, maybe it's no, maybe it's later. Don't give up in the valley of disappointment. Slowly, then suddenly. So we apply this like the Apostle Paul applies this to all the areas of your life. You can apply, some of you need to apply this truth to an area of your life that I've not even brought up today. But God's brought it up to your heart. The Holy Spirit's brought it up to your heart. You know where you need this principle in your life today. More than I know. But for some of us today, go back to prayer. Jesus said, when I return someday, will I find people who have tenacity about their business, tenacity about their physical fitness, tenacity about their learning a new craft or skill, tenacity about some relationship in this earth, tenacity about staying after that difficult person until they finally get the person to bend their will, tenacity about how they handle their money, but they have no tenacity about their faith in God? When he comes back, will he find people who call themselves believers who don't believe God is worth pursuing until we see the results we're looking for? Will he find faith in all the earth? Will he find faith in this room? And so I hope that today we will remember. Slowly then suddenly. And my action step today, my closing statement, I wish I could leave you with an action step. The action step is a quote from the scripture. It's a quote from what Luke said to us when he told us the story that Jesus told about the widow and the judge. Here's the action step. Always pray. Never give up. That's my appeal. I hope that somebody in this room today is going to decide. If God says yes, I can move on. If God says no, I move on. His will. But if God has not answered yet, I'm not going to have less spiritual tenacity than I am in other parts of my life. I'm going to be a person of faith who believes that God loves me, and there's a reason why I'm still knocking at his door. And I'm going to keep on asking. I'm going to keep on seeking. I'm going to keep on knocking. And for you today, maybe the answer is this. Maybe the challenge for you is this. Always pray and never give up. Would you say it with me again? Ready? Always pray and never give up. May that be our testimony. Let's pray.